Hi, this is Kira Kelly. I'm the DP of Him, and we're here on the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ilya, how's it going?
Hey, Ben, it is going pretty well. It's time for another fine episode of the Cinematography podcast. Kira Kelly's on the show today. You interviewed her, right?
Yeah, and I didn't. When I talked to her, I didn't remember if she'd been on the show. But as it turns out, this was the third time she'd been on the show. But you interviewed her twice.
That's true. I interviewed her twice. Kira's great. I had two fantastic conversations there with her. She's super talented, and I'm glad that you got to have the full Kira Kelly experience this time.
And she shot the awesome sports horror film Him, which. I definitely unapologetically love that movie. I really enjoyed it. It's super awesome. What's that? What are you holding? That's cover of American Cinematographer.
Cover of American Cinematographer right here. Cover of American Cinematographer. I'm trying to not block the mic too, but yes, Kira Kelly made the cover of American Cinematographer, which is freaking awesome. You know what? I think we should invite someone from American Cinematographer to come on the podcast and talk about it. I think that would be great. I think maybe we could get Steven Pizzillo. He's editor over there. I think it'd be fun to talk to him, or maybe someone else would like to take the trip. So maybe we should do that. Maybe we should have
former editor-in-chief David E. Williams. Did you know David?
We met.
He's writing a book right now about a cinematographer, and I have chatted with him on Facebook about when he's done with his book, having him onto the show.
We've had Jay Holben on the show. Jay Holben writes for American Cinematographer. We've known many people over the years who've written articles and stuff for American Cinematographer. I'm very friendly with all those people. I think that we should get someone to come on the show and talk about the experience. Let's do it.
I think that's a smart idea. I love their magazine. They've been doing great work for decades.
I think so too. All right. So Ben, it's time for our close focus time of the show. This is when we talk about what's going on topically in the world, what's going on in the world of entertainment or cinematography, or really it could be almost anything, but something that sort of usually impacts the greater business. What is our close focus today?
And now, close focus.
Today, it's a little piece of entertainment news about the Riyadh Comedy Festival that has done an interesting thing that I never see happen. It has split comedians, comedian versus comedian, and to a certain degree, like I think I found out about it probably the same way a lot of people did. Noted comedian David Cross wrote an op-ed that was basically condemning every comedian who's going to this thing, and it's some pretty major comedians, including like Louis C.K. and Bill Burr and
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. I mean, like some of our biggest comics are going out there. And I saw also an interview with Mark Maron where he was sort of condemning it, but he's also like, I didn't get an invite, and kind of made it a joke.
He actually put quite a few jokes in there. There's a Hollywood Reporter article that we were talking about just before this. Yeah. And there's a good quote in there from Mark Maron where he says, I mean, how do you even promote that? Like from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it.
Yeah, and so like Dave Cross basically like fully condemns,
of course,
everyone doing it. Yeah. But also like I've seen other comedians kind of talk about it and say like these people who are doing it, they're not people who don't work or have a hard time. They're usually booked pretty solid. But also, and Louis C.K. is his own hot button in so many ways. I used to once upon a time be a big fan of his, and if I'm honest with myself, I think he's a great comedian who, as a human being, has some issues that he, I think, dealt with horribly. But that notwithstanding, I happened to watch an interview that he did with Bill Maher, also not my favorite person in the world, but an interview he did with Bill Maher on Bill Maher's show, Real Time on HBO, where he talks about why he went. And I actually thought, Louis C.K. is very smart and very thoughtful, and he said that it really did occur to him. All the things that people are saying about it went through his head before he agreed to do it. And his reason for doing it, I would not be surprised if most of, some of the people like Dave Chappelle, who I'm a big Dave Chappelle fan, but it's hard to get behind him lately. like I feel like he does things just because people tell him not to do them, or he does things just to piss people off sometimes.
Sure.
But Bill Burr, I think, is someone who's on the straight and narrow. I think Bill Burr is a decent person, and I mean, just like when you see the lineup, you're like, these are it's not like I don't know. They're not like our Castaway comics. They're people who are like very mainstream comedians. And Louis C.K. basically said that his reason for doing it was like the whole idea is to go to a place like Saudi Arabia and spread an American value like comedy, like being able to, make fun of powerful people and make jokes and stuff like that. The question is, will they be able to in a country where like women aren't allowed to drive? I don't know.
Comedian Atsuko Okasuka. She has a Netflix special. She posted the contract, actually, because she was invited to go speak at this Riyadh Comedy Festival. And it might be possible to get some American values in there by making fun of some things, but the list of things you're not allowed to degrade, defame, or bring into disrespect, or contempt, scandal, embarrassment, or ridicule includes the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, its leadership, public figures, culture, people, the Saudi royal family, legal system, government, and any religious tradition, religious figure, or religious practice. So, there is some there's some pretty serious limitations if you are trying to venture into saying anything defamatory or anything that someone could take the wrong way about.
Wow, I wonder how
Saudi
Dave
Arabia.
Chappelle's gonna handle that, because Dave Chappelle does not seem to take well to people telling him what he's not allowed to say.
He's probably not going to mention Saudi Arabia once. It's going to be, it's going to be.
Yeah, but Dave Chappelle isn't going to be up there and be like, "What's the deal with airplanes?" Like, that's not the kind of thing he does. Like, he
end up in a jail cell. He will end up, being caned to death. He will, like, something terrible will happen to him if he did that. I'm sure that this has been made very clear to every comedian who's going to this festival.
Well, I mean, I guess when it comes down to it, like, I understand why. This is where I fall on it. I understand why people wouldn't want to do it. I wouldn't give anyone any trouble for saying no to that. But I do think that it opens the Overton window just a little nudge over there. And perhaps, this is the first time they've done it with American comedians. If it goes well and they keep doing it, maybe it will, the idea of freedom of speech might slowly start to seep into, a more authoritarian country over time, and it might make a difference. I think that if you think about it from the point of view of like, why are these people taking blood money, which I can see that point, then perhaps it's a bad idea. But if you look at it the other way and say, these people are importing our ideas into their minds, and maybe just because comedians are going to push the envelope a little bit. These guys are going to walk right up to the edge and push it just a bit. It might open, I don't know, it might open some minds slightly, so that by the 10th Riyadh Comedy Festival, they are a little bit more loose and free about this stuff.
I don't know if I can sign off on that way of thinking. I mean, and I think Mark Maron summed it up really well too. There's another good quote from Mark Maron in this Hollywood Reporter article, which he says, the same guy that's going to pay them is the same guy that paid the guy to bonesaw Jamal Khashoggi and put him in a fucking suitcase. And it's like, yeah, it's like, but don't let that stop the yucks. It's going to be a good time. It's like, I think there's something to be said about, American culture seeping in and having a positive impact. But at the same time, there is a severe compromising, potentially, of one's own personal values to say that, we're going to go to this place and that we're essentially de facto going to be supporting this administration. And I think that it might be more powerful to say, no, we're not going to do this. No, we're not going to be a part of your show. We're not going to let you know that this is acceptable. It doesn't fall in our, our worldview of what's right and what's wrong.
I can't and won't argue with your point of view there. I just kind of, my feeling is just, maybe getting more free speech into their country is better. That's,
All right. Well,
And even if it's severely restricted by contract, free speech, it's kind of the idea of it. Because like the fifth time Bill Burr goes there and they get a little more comfortable with him, he could rail at their politicians a little more. I don't know.
One could argue that we're seeing an erosion of our free speech in this country. So to me, it's like
easily, yes, one could. Although I feel like the Jimmy Kimmel thing was a pretty big victory of free speech, frankly.
Well, we'll. This certainly isn't going to be over and decided today. So I think we should probably get to the interview with Kira Kelly.
All right, here she is.
The Cinematography Podcast interview.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I kind of just want to jump into him. When I first saw the trailers for it, I was like, oh my God, it didn't feel derivative in any way, but it reminded me of The Substance when I saw the trailers for The Substance. And when I saw the movie, the visuals did not disappoint in that way. If you listen to the podcast at all, The Substance is like my absolute favorite movie last year. And I feel like they both kind of deal with unfair expectations that we put on people. But they both kind of go at it with this like just intense but also surreal approach to the imagery. What when you were first approached to do the script, what spoke to you about the script, and did you see that kind of that intense surrealism in it before you even came on board?
Yeah, so the script that I first read was slightly different than the one we ended up shooting, but it was still like very visual. Like I remember being like, a lot of the obviously had the elements of the compound and the
Yeah.
elements of like just some of the surrealistic things that start happening to Cam. It definitely had, a lot of the movie, the focus is about, CTE and brain injury, and hallucinations are a big part of, are a big symptom of that. And so it was really something to play with, of just thinking like where, like trying to play with the audience of like knowing whether or not Cam is actually seeing something, or if Cam isn't hallucinating, he doesn't know either. And so I knew that visuals were going to be a fun way to show a lot of that. And then once I started talking to Justin, the director, about it, that's when it was just like, oh wow, this is going to be fun. It was, the one of the first references that Justin, talked about and showed me, which was a movie I was not familiar with, was The Holy Mountain.
Oh yeah,
It's like,
Jodorowsky. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Did you watch any of his other films? You watch El Topo or Santa Sangre or any of those? Man.
No, I need to watch them, but I watched Holy Mountain, and it was just, I remember sitting there just being like, whoa, what? I've
Yeah.
never received a reference like that before. So that was really exciting. And then we also, like, obviously, like, Jacob's Ladder was a big part of that. As far as like the hallucinations, and also, we started looking at movies like, The Shining, and, Black Swan. And then he also had these other references, like for a lot of the sports stuff, had a love of like 90s Nike ads, which were like super stylized,
I can see that. Yeah.
really fun lighting and all that. So yeah, it was interesting. And I think this film actually like, ended up, presenting a fun challenge of like, you have two different genres that are coming together for like one of the first times, and they both have very specific tropes, and so it was fun to be able to play with each of those and try to like, find our way that was something unique for this movie. So
I also I watched an interview with you where you talked about the influence of a photographer named Gabriel Moses.
yes.
And I looked at some of his pictures and I was unfamiliar with him, and just a real striking approach that's kind of like a Bob Richardson-esque top lighting kind of a thing on a lot of stuff.
And that was something Justin really loved. Like he loved the idea of doing top light. He loved, like, especially in the training field, that. So yeah, Gabriel Moses was a big reference for us, and actually a lot of his, I, when before we even shot the camera test, I was in touch with Tom Poole, who was the colorist on the film, and I showed him a bunch of those photos, and so we knew that we really wanted to have like the skin tones have a bit of reflexivity, that that we could really play some of this shape from the top light on also. So yeah, that was a really fun reference.
Yeah. I would encourage anyone listening to this to check out Gabriel Moses' photography, because it's gorgeous. And a lot of times when we have people on here, they're talking about like classic photographers or well-known photographers, from the 50s or whatever. This is a guy who's working right now.
Exactly.
Like his work. So did you talk to him at all about like how to achieve any of that style, or was he around at all, or did you just look at the photo? Yeah.
No, no, no. We haven't been in touch. We just kind
Uh,
of looked at a bunch of his like, images, and like Justin showed me the ones that he enjoyed and then I liked, and then we had other, references also. But yeah, that's sort of like I just love how he does his skin tones. I think they're
yeah.
really a lot of depth, and that's kind of where we were going for with some of that some of ours.
So what kind of approaches did you go for finding kind of the depth in the skin tone? Actually, firstly, like what did you shoot on? What was the main format?
We shot with the Alexa 35.
Mm.
We use Panavision lenses. We had the T series, but they were these T series lenses that were 1.85 squeeze that were very modified. But then we also had a variety of these other specialized lenses that were 2x squeezes. But those were like, the MAP 55, which is a lens I've loved for years now. We had this D series portrait lens, which
Mm.
we used for the party, that had a bit of like that smearing effect for
Oh
when
yeah.
in the middle of that. We had some Petsfuls, we had some Pathés, we had like a whole collection of lenses that we use specifically for a lot of these like hallucination sequences. This one, I was lucky in that I did have a good amount of prep to
Mm.
be able to have those conversations. I don't know if something had like a shorter prep. I don't know if maybe I would have had that same luxury.
How much time did you have for prep on this?
I did about I think it was 8 weeks.
Oh yeah.
But I started prepping before that was 8 weeks in Albuquerque. But then I started a lot of prep, before I left LA and was able to go back and forth to Panavision there.
So let's talk about your creative collaboration with the director Justin Tipping. Because this is not this isn't. There are so many movies that look like so many other movies. This movie only really looks like itself. It's such a unique look and a specific look for this film. How did the two of you collaborate? Were there storyboards, previs, shot lists, long conversations about how to shoot scenes? How much of it, like how did you guys decide how to arrive at this really specific look that you created?
So when I was hired on the job, Justin already had a pretty in-depth lookbook. Like it was really beautiful about like, the feel and how he wanted, the costumes to look, how he wanted the lighting, all that, like all these, very specific. But then he was always open to lots of collaboration from each of the department heads.
Mm.
So what I love that we did early on is that we would have these meetings that wasn't just me and Justin. It was like Jordan Ferrer, the production designer. It was Dominique Dawson, the costume designer, and Justin. And so the four of us would really sit and like do our own very specific, table page turn about like where the characters are, what happens visually in the story. So it was, I feel like with this film, it does have such a strong visual look because all of the departments, all the department heads, we were all working together to make like one movie. And feel like that's something on this one. It just kind of clicked, and I think it was because of these early conversations with Justin. Like, he would talk about like Cam's descent into this world, and then
Mm.
like how that matches with Isaiah's storyline and where they're going. So we had a lot of really fun conversations about how we were going to do that. And then specifically with cinematography, we definitely storyboarded. We started storyboarding some of the bigger sequences before I even got to Albuquerque. It was like like some of the football drills,
Yeah.
where we knew that it had a very specific editing style, and we knew that we wanted to have a lot of shots to be able to supplement that. So a lot of like, the said drill where the guy gets hit in the face.
Oof. Such an intense sequence.
That one was storyboarded. Some sequences like the end fight scene that was stunt viz. that we were able to kind of work through.
When you say stunt viz, is that like the stuntmen kind of worked out the sequence and gave you like a iPhone level recording or something of it?
Yeah, exactly. Like Justin talked them through like the moments that he wanted and the shots and like the story beats within the fight. And then yeah, the stunt guys go off into their cardboard world and
No, no.
make like this awesome
they,
thing.
they are kind of the elite athletes of the film world. They just do stuff with their bodies that nobody else would ever be able to do.
Yeah. And then yeah, with Justin and I, it was like a lot of we did shot list a lot and like tried to figure out like what are the shots that we needed. So it wasn't just like shooting coverage to shoot coverage. It was very yeah, I think it was like very intentional as far as like what shots we needed for what sequences. And we also had a lot of conversations like, you know, I ended up like really falling in love with the idea of like the compound. So within the compound, it's like this idea that, you know, it's we start going deeper and deeper below ground and maybe shafts of sunlight come more few and far between.
It's kind of a Dante's Inferno kind of thing going on in there.
Exactly that, yes. And so that recovery room, we knew that like, you know, it had to have play a bunch of different roles. You know what I mean? Like it had to be the hyperbaric chamber, the sauna, the ice bath. But I wanted it to feel slightly different in each time. So I worked really closely with Jordan, the production designer, and my incredible gaffer Bob Bates to uh, design the set in a way where we could have integrated lighting and really have the lighting change, you know, per the color wise per sequence. And so I ended up like making this full document of like what color means within the story and what different scenes got what color. And, we knew at the end, like, for example, at the Savior's party, we wanted that to have this like very red, but with orange highlights. And then by the end, where we get to that big fight, and we knew it wanted to be like just more rage and
Mm-hmm.
like this sort of, and so we ended up going for a color that isn't very ragey, but like it ended up working that way in the story, which was like this red and like fuchsia or magenta, deep like magenta. So it was fun to be like have that that story track out color wise also.
So I always ask people about this because color can be used, in such an interesting and symbolic way in this movie because a lot of it's interiors. So you're controlling the color of the light, and there is obviously some kind of color symbolism or some kind of color story going on. So how do you go about like creating that color story? And secondly, how do you track it? Like, you're on, I don't know how many days you shot, but you're on day, whatever, 25, and you're like, okay, what room are we in? What's the color? Do you have what's your system? If you were talking to someone who'd never done it before, how do you create a system where you can know where you are? Because it's easy to get lost.
So for that, what I ended up doing, like in prep, I knew all the, I knew Justin and I had talked. I knew that he wanted red for the Savior's party, just because of so much of their symbolism was like this, like oxblood red and all
Yeah.
that. So we started bringing in a little bit of the warmth there. But then I started tracking all through the script. This was still in prep before we did the camera test about like where I wanted, like the hyperbaric chamber. I knew that like that whole conversation is about like there's, jealousy. There's a part of like wanting to be where the other person is, but then you're not really sure. So, I started looking through all these, there's like the same things of, what color theory means for humans and what colors evoke what. And so I started thinking about like, how can I actually show some of those things? And so, yeah, I had a whole full document of, per each scene, like, I knew that the hyperbaric chamber was going to be this very green with blue, a blue mixed in with that. I knew that the room, when he's in the recovery room, but all the girls are dancing, it just felt like, this more of this like sexy vibe, which ended up being like this purple and cyan and that sort of feel. So I had all that tracked out. And then in the camera test, I just started finding the colors. I would just sort of like set up the scenes and be like, okay, let me see, this cyan versus this violet, or this red and this fuchsia, like just really kind of trying to find the mix there. And then we made all the notes on the camera test so that once we got into the recovery room and those scenes, we were able to call back those colors, and design it that way. Like, and that was also, after the camera test, I was able to take it, through to, we watched it with, with our director and our colorist Tom Poole and director Justin Tipping, just to make sure we were on the same wavelength and like all the colors were working there. And yeah, it was just like it was a fun document from the beginning of like emotions and then what colors I could use to show those emotions and then finding specific gels and well, not gels, but like
I was gonna have, when you said that, I was like,
why
oh no, gels.
not gels, you know what I mean? Like we're all working with like, vortexes and asterotubes and all that.
Yeah, yeah. No, but so when you say like when you did research to find out like what colors evoke which emotions, like what are the resources that you found that are most helpful for figuring that out? Are there books on that? Like what's the
There's like color, yeah, there are color theory books. There's stuff like, not just with cinematography, but in painting, like, for throughout years, like what colors sort of, red, I guess because of blood and humans, it always is kind of like this danger, but also is like a bit of passion,
mm,
Yellow is like, creates a little bit of unease and like, it could either be sickly or it could be something that's like, a little, but it can also be um like make you question certain things. The green, it kind of leads with this might be more of a modern construct, but like it's like the envy and like desiring something different. So yeah, just kind of going into like playing with some of those things and just kind of seeing what fit our story best at that time.
and when I think about like you talked about one of the references were like 1990s like Nike commercials and stuff. I always think back to that time as like stuff that would show up in music videos or those kinds of commercials would then get like used a lot. Like I remember the shift tilt lens became a big thing, or when the cameras could suddenly speed ramp. And were there any techniques that you took from those commercials and were like, hey, I can apply that here, in an interesting, fresh way?
I mean, I think that like, so for most of the like the 90s like um commercials, the sports commercials, we used a lot of that within the training field
Yeah.
of really sort of like playing with that, like, like top light that's not very filled in, more stylized sort of feel. And then camera movement wise, I mean, in there, part of the, conversations that we had with Justin about the camera movement is that, once we are at the, at the beginning, it should be fun. He's playing football. There, like it's much more loose. We have handhelds. We have like, body cam. We had this boomerang rig that sent the camera flying down
Oh, really?
flying down the field. We had all these different ways of just kind of like moving the camera and like being super playful with it. And I think that, basically what happens then in the story is that as Cam continues his week of descent, the camera starts locking off more. And that's where we get into more of these like center punched static frames. It's very, he's trapped,
Yeah.
literally, figuratively, all the ways. And so that's where we had like much more, um, yeah, much more like steady cam, or if it was like dolly moves and techno cranes, very, subtle moves in that way.
That's cool because I that goes opposite of what I would assume. Like most movies would be like it's more stable when it's at the beginning, and as things get more unhinged, then they tend to go more Steadicam or more handheld rather. But for this, no, and I can totally see exactly what you're talking about though. It's like it's like it became less fun and more business. The further it got in.
Yeah, and it's just more of like, the camera definitely, we still were moving it a lot, but it was definitely much more like intentional movements.
Yeah.
Although once we get to like the fight scene at the very end and kind of in the film room fight, which is like that fuchsia and everything, at
Yeah.
that point we're like fully handheld. We had image shakers, like it was supposed to feel very crazy. But then the next scene, we get out in this like kind of blinding daylight, and again, you're back into this very rigid ritualistic world
Yeah.
wise.
And that goes. I never thought about it, but that goes very Holy Mountain again at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Wow. That's it's. I wouldn't have made that connection, and as soon as you said that, I'm like, I totally like that's brilliant. That's so cool. I don't know why more people don't study Jodorowsky, because his work is just so brilliantly surreal. I mean, we talk about David Lynch or whatever other amazing surrealists, but Jodorowsky, someone who has, I guess, maybe a little bit less known in America, but his work is just so trippy. Trippy is the only way to put it.
I had never heard of him
Mm.
before this experience. And so that, yeah, really, it was one of those things where you're watching and just like, what is going on? But then you still want to like, I don't, there's a level of engagement with it that I found really, I don't know, like primal, like you really, you can't stop watching, which is really fun. Again, like it's still such an exciting thing for me about this film that we had like Justin being a director, being so willing to go there, and then also Monkey Paw, like super supportive of just like, sure, yes, let's. I don't, there was like a lot of creativity on set, and I feel like it was like all the departments kind of working together on something that was definitely out of the box, which I'm super proud of.
Well, and you touched on this a little bit, and I always admire when filmmakers do what you did here, which is no shame for people who cover a scene conventionally. There's nothing wrong with conventional coverage. It works. It gets the job done. But this is a film that doesn't feel covered. It feels, every frame feels kind of handmade. So kind of take me through kind of the difficulty and the thought process. If someone was listening to this and was like, I don't want to just rely on conventional coverage. What are the pitfalls of saying like, okay, every angle is bespoke?
That I think was for me one of the most exciting parts of the prep process. Justin, and I'll talk about myself to a certain degree. Like, I had done a lot of television, a lot, which I'm like, still TV's great. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of times you can, a lot of times you can fall into the thing of like, having to shoot coverage for not even necessarily the director who's directing it, but like for a showrunner or for producers later. So you have to shoot more coverage.
Well, I mean, I've heard stories about like on a lot of network or a lot of big television where they don't know exactly what the showrunner is going to want, and they need to make sure that their ass is covered. And so the phrase that has been said to me, and I have used myself, is shooting a pile of feathers and making a chicken out of it in post.
There you go. We can talk about the
Yeah.
chickens. So Justin is also, he did his first movie, Kicks. I forget what year it came out, but then had a long stint working in television. And, I think for him, this was his chance to feel as though like I can do the coverage that I want. And like, he knew he was going to be in the edit, and, Monkey Paw was super supportive with a bunch of ideas. And so, it was one of those things is like we were very specific about each scene, what shots do we need to tell this story, and then what do we not, like,
Hmm.
okay, it's two-hander, we know we need a two-shot, this person definitely needs a close-up, do we need a close-up on this person, or is it just about the reaction of our main character? So we really went through a lot of that, and we're very, I think we were, Justin was great about like, being in the editing room beforehand of just like, I don't need that shot, I don't need that setup, or this is where we need extra shots. Like for example, for any of the football drill, again, I'll come back to like the guy getting in the
Hmm.
face. That was one that we had shot that scene. We were, I think it was our last day. We had to shoot in that tent. Um,
Well, and to build a little context for listeners who haven't seen the movie, it's like an early scene of training, but it's where we're starting to learn the stakes of the training, and it's like running drills super fast. And if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do, one of those machines that shoots footballs shoots a guy in the face with the football.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a guy standing maybe about like less than 10 feet away from this jugs machine, and the football
Oof.
shot in his face. But all that whole thing is about rhythm and timing and
Yeah.
like having time. Um,
And repetition, like getting the pattern of it and then escalating that pattern.
Exactly. And so for that scene, like we were, like I said, we had shot the scene. We were about to wrap that location, and the last day we got, from a list of shots from our editor Taylor Mason, who's incredible. And I remember like the list of shots. It would be like, wouldn't it be great if we got And I remember looking at the list, I was like, wow, that's a lot of shots. How are we gonna?
Second unit.
And it was, but once I saw her put that together, it was just, I think that's the most cutty of the sequences. But once you see it, like it's amazing. And every shot we got there, we needed. And she built this sort of sequence that's incredible. So in those places, yes, and I guess I wouldn't even really call that coverage, but we knew where we needed a lot of shots, and then where in
Yeah.
other scenes we could let it play more on performance and let the actors kind of settle in a little bit. So yeah, it was really exciting to be able to play with like how much coverage is just enough coverage to, to tell the story, to show the story.
No, that's always interesting, and I always, I look at movies like Guillermo del Toro is notorious for this, where it's like scenes don't feel covered; they feel built. You might cut back to an angle, but it's like fewer angles and more meaning in each one. Um,
For me, that's what's really exciting as a DP. Like it's something where, I've talked about this before, but I do think that, I I went to film school, and one of my one of my professors was this guy named Thomas Gunning. And we had all this like history of silent film classes like that were incredible, like just seeing Murnau, seeing like, I had this whole class just on Fritz Lang and all of his silent films. And I just remember
what school was this? What was the film school?
it was at Northwestern.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, and it was, and I remember sitting there and like my favorite class was this real I had never really heard of Fritz Lang before.
Mm.
Like I'm sitting there and watching these silent films, and I think for me in cinematography of just like they were so great at like showing like visual storytelling. And I feel like yes, for me that is now like every challenge I put in every job of just is an audience able to tell the story if they don't have the wonderful dialogue, if they don't have the music, if they don't have all those things, although the silent films had music too, but like if they don't have all of those other things helping the story along, could they tell what's happening just with the imagery? And I feel like with him it's like one of the first films that I can actively say, yeah, I think so. I think that there's like can see it happening, and that's what's super exciting to me. And I feel like that comes back to coverage. It's just like when you suddenly get into this thing of like close up, close up, close up, how can we know? Like
Yeah.
where it gets interesting is where you don't have the other close up, and where you don't like know exactly why you don't. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Exciting to me.
No, that's great. I mean, to me that well, I mean, if it's sort of like there's that writing axiom of like if the writer isn't surprising themselves, they're not going to surprise the reader. And I feel like for you, for a cinematographer, if you're not challenging yourself in some way to grow and to take chances, because I mean, when you think about like what Fritz Lang and all of those people are doing is they were inventing the language that we all use now. And it's amazing to think that it didn't exist before F.W. Murnau and all Buster Keaton and all these people created this, and then so and I feel like you're doing this, but like how do you take that language and push it further? And which brings me to the FLIR camera, the infrared. What are we the only time I'd ever seen it in a movie was this documentary about Waco, the Branch Davidians, and they had FLIR footage of the explosions that they were using to kind of analyze, but I'd never seen it in a movie, and I'd never seen it so freaking detailed. Like, I'm sure that those cameras have come a long way, but how much of what comes out of the camera is what we're seeing in the film?
So I mean, we're basically everything that comes out of the camera we're seeing in the film, but then we do like, for example, I think that the shot that's most known is like from the trailer where the two helmets are
Oh
colliding.
my God. It's so impactful.
It's great. And I feel like for us,
Literally.
using the FLIR, exactly. Using the FLIR was like, how do we show, like, I feel like we've, as audiences, we've become kind of immune to violence. We've become immune to sports violence. We've not really, like, yeah, somebody got hurt and yeah, they look like they're in pain, but we wanted to be able to show what happens to the body
Yeah.
underneath all that. Like a concussion is literally your brain bruising from being jerked around in your skull.
Yeah.
And so it was like trying to really kind of show that. And how it ended up happening was that Justin had seen this music video that was done all with thermal cams, and we were like, wow, that's really cool. And then right around the time we were shooting, Zone of Interest came out. And then within Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer has this whole sequence that he uses with black and white thermal footage of the young girl like leaving apples and like in her house. I remember there's like one shot of like this bed sheet blowing in the wind. It's just stunning.
You're totally right. I thought it was infrared. I didn't realize it was a thermal camera.
Yeah, it's thermal, and it's like, and it's totally like it's almost ghostly. It's like if it
Mm.
made I don't know. There's something so different about it, but you still see a human there. Um, we just all fell in love with it, but we wanted to figure out a way to be able to have the same shot and then just flicker in and out of like from the Alexa 35 footage to the thermal footage, so you can just kind of flicker in and out of it, so it wouldn't have to force a cut to someplace else. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So we ended up like creating this little rig where we ended up buying this FLIR camera off eBay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We bought it off of eBay, and then like my first AC, Megan Noche, she like, 3D printed a focus ring and hot glued it on there. It was the whole setup was a little nutty and fun. Um, but we put the, FLIR right on top of the Alexa 35, and we found that like, with the Alexa 35 had a 50 mil, and we found that like 5 feet out, the two images we could get them to converge so that, we could set it up and have it like something that they could cut to,
Oh, really?
yeah.
So, wait, so like they were separated by 5 feet?
No, no, they were right on top of each other, two cameras right on top of each other, and then when the subject was about 5 feet away,
Oh, okay.
images would become one. There was enough, like, we couldn't do it. We got the FLIR late in prep. So at first we were thinking about trying to do like a 3D rig, but then I tried to shoot it through a filter. It wouldn't go through glass. So we just figured, okay, let's just put them as close to each other as possible.
Mm.
Um, and so, in those sequences is those two cameras. And then VFX did a great job of like, adding great brains and accentuating some of the like the muscles. Like with the
Mm.
floor, you can kind of see blood flow, and you see all of like, different, yeah, you basically see blood flow and where blood is and where coldness is and all that stuff. Like all the dark stuff that's running down their faces, that's all just cold water. Like when we did the camera test, it was just like a bunch of ice packs and heaters and blow dryers just to see how we could kind of make it
Wow.
work. Like for example, in that tent that we shot the helmets colliding, we had to shoot that first thing in the morning because it's all about contrast with like when you're trying to expose for the FLIR. And so we had to shoot it first thing in the morning because everything around it was cold, and so that would make the dark background darker
Mm.
for those images. And if I'd done it in the afternoon, the background would have been much brighter. And so that was, I mean, it was one of those things where we really wanted to again like show a level of like what is happening to the body. And later on in the film, like when we're in the that rage film room fight, we go into another version of the FLIR. Like it has a bunch of different recordings. You can do white hot, black hot, and then there's a bunch of different color variations you can do. And we did like the red color there to kind of, so it wasn't as jarring on the eyes. But
Yeah.
yeah, the FLIR was a fun tool.
Well, it's fun to see it because that's a technique I've never seen. I've never seen anyone. I'm not familiar with that music video, but my guess is even if I saw that music video, it's not used the same exact way that you used it here. It was such a brilliant thing, and I feel like this is why actually I'm not a sports person. Like I like sports movies, but I don't watch actual sports because I have this feeling of like I don't want to see anybody get hurt.
Yeah.
And it made it very real. It brought it into like a very visceral reality to be like, oh, here's what's going on inside the person.
That's and early again, like early in prep. I think one of the first times Justin and I hung out, we went to like I think it was a Rams game. It was me and Justin and some of the producers and everything. And I remember just watching the whole thing, and somebody got like, I don't know if they got a concussion, but there was a scare that there might be a concussion.
Mm.
But it was like the Kaiser Permanente concussion cam or concussion report. And I was like,
That's
what are we doing?
that is ghoulish.
I know.
I
It's
don't
just
know.
strange. Anyway, that's a sidebar.
No, total sidebar. Yeah, no. People are always like, "Aren't you going to go to the Super Bowl party?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good."
I watch the commercials.
Yeah, I know. People are like, "Oh, but you'll see those commercials," and I'm like, "I have a trick for seeing all those commercials. Watch anything else that week.
Exactly.
Those commercials will be everywhere." So that's amazing. I mean, I feel like I've gone through the stuff I wanted to ask you about, but are there any other like amazing adversities that you overcame, or crazy stories, or unbelievable setups that you were able to pull off that maybe me as the casual viewer I'm not going to pick up on, but were like a huge triumph for you and your team?
Yeah, I mean, the Fleur definitely was one of those. I would say that like I don't know, it felt like every day was a big triumph on the on the movie just because of like, we it was like a 30-day shoot.
That was a 30-day shoot? You're kidding me.
Shoot. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It was a lot.
By comparison, because we had Ben Kraken on here who shot The Substance, they shot that for 100 days.
100.
But like at least a third of it, if not a half of it, were like insert days. Like if you've seen it, the movie
Oh,
is lousy with close-ups.
yeah.
But like 30 days seems like an outrageously tight schedule for something this polished.
It was outrageously tight. And I do think like we just had such a great team and we had such a great like, between like my gaffer Bob Bates, my key grip Rudy Covarrubias, like they were doing things that we had just never done before, like different camera rigs and things like that. And it was just like it was very organized. And I will say it's like this is testament. It's so rare that you do like a cinematography podcast and then like call out the line producer, but our line producer David Kern
Yeah.
was really amazing.
Unsung heroes, people who figure out how to like
Yeah,
like
figured out how to put it on the screen. We had a tight budget, we had a very small amount of days, but he was really great about like how do we get it, how do we show it all? And that's where, that really made a difference.
I don't think we've ever talked on this podcast about how DPs talk to line producers, but it's like you guys are both about logistics,
Yeah.
and so the line producer is going to have a certain set of logistics, like we only have this actor from this day to that day, or we only have this location on this days, or this specialized prop won't be available till blah blah blah. And then you have your own concerns that are like, we need this FLIR camera to be able to do XYZ. We have to do all these tests. It's sort of the clash of logistics and who wins in the logistics wars. And if the line producer and the DP aren't on the same page, you're both screwed.
Sideways really
Yeah.
quickly. And I feel like that's something where it's like trying to figure out that relationship and really, build a trust because it's like, I'm obviously not going to name any names, but I've worked on shoots before where line producers like, okay, we have this much. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know about that. How is all that coming about?
Yeah.
Like, so, but this one was like a really, David and I ended up having like a really great relationship in being able to, I would have my asks and it was never like a complete no. It was more of just like, okay, let's figure that out, and well, what
Mm-hmm.
about this ask? Which is an ask that's more important? And I feel like as DPs, we also have to realize that, okay, there's no world, no matter what budget you get, where you're going to get everything you want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
So
get
it's
that.
kind of like trying to figure out like, okay, what do I want more? What do I want most? And then just kind of like going from there. And David was a really great partner in like trying to figure out like, okay, how do we protect this? I know that for example, all the lighting and the integrated lighting that we were talking about within those set builds was not cheap, obviously.
Yeah.
But we weren't working with like a limited budget. I mean, unlimited budget. So we had a very tight budget also. And so trying to figure out how to reserve that so that the production designer Jordan and I could really put all of that like work together and actually have it something that showed, but then still be not like, take budget away from everything else is a fine line. So that was like, it's a good relationship. And I feel like we ended up, all of us, every department figured out a way to put everything on the screen, which I feel like, now it's just like, with budgets is definitely a challenge. So it's like it's a cliche, but it's a cliche, I guess, because it's true of just like, frictions and limitations are a great place for creativity and trying to figure out like, how to navigate different situations.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave off. Well, I should say, how did it feel to have shot the #1 movie in America?
Pretty great. Was it the number one
It
movie?
was, yeah, yeah. Last week it was #1.
Then I'll start over again. It was amazing, amazing, and like the fact that like it came out and it was on IMAX theaters. I
Ooh.
was able to see it like at the Chinese theater for the premiere, and it was just such a great crowd, and yeah, really exciting, really exciting.
Yeah, it looks great on the big screen. So before we go, where can people find you anywhere online if they want to check out more of your work or interact with you, Instagram or any of those things, or do you have a website?
I do. I'm on Instagram, probably too often.
Mm,
It's Kira Kelly DP, and then my website is kirakellydp.com. So yeah, Kira Kelly DP.
yeah. Well, and again, I can't encourage people enough to go out and check out him while it's still in theaters. It really does look great on the big screen. I don't know when it goes to streaming, but it's still out in theaters. So check it out. Hopefully, this episode will drop while it's still in theaters. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it.
All right, so that was Kira Kelly. Kira, thank you so much for coming out, and I cannot encourage people enough to go check out him. I love it. It's a very innovative looking film. She does she does such cool stuff. The FLIR camera stuff that she talks about. Some of the most amazing looking. I've never. There's nothing like seeing a shot you've never seen before in a movie before, and she does that repeatedly in this movie. So,
oh, that's awesome. Okay,
yeah.
cool. So Ben, you'll never guess what time it is.
What time would that be?
It is time to thank one of our fine sponsors of this program, the companies that make it possible. Today we got to thank Laowa. Laowa, maker of incredible lenses for cinema, and they have a new lens coming out, which is a probe zoom. Usually probe lenses are not zoom lenses, but Laowa is breaking this mold by creating a couple of different probe zoom lenses.
I saw these at NAB.
Yeah. They
blew my mind. I was like, I didn't think you could make a probe lens that also had a zoom lens on it. So yeah, I'm just repeating the thing you just said. But I remember my delight when it was like, holy crap, that's a probe lens that zooms? Get out of town.
It is, which means you can do kind of fun things too, like a Zolly, zoom in and dolly out at the same time. Like probe lenses are often used in these sort of like moving configurations. Not always, but they can. They've got two different versions.
Bring that Vertigo look to your Pizza Hut commercial.
That's exactly right. A 15 to 35 T12 and a 15 to 24 T8. They're available individually. They're available as kits. There's a whole bunch of different lens mount options, including Canon EF, Canon RF, Sony FE, Nikon Z, L mount, as well as, of course, PL. So PL is like a default option. And then they also have different methodologies of using each of these zoom lenses. They've got a direct view version, which is basically a lens at the end of the long periscope. Then they've got like a 35-degree angle. And then they've got like a periscope, which is like, a different sort of shape. They got a bunch of different options. We have these listed over on the Hot Rod Cameras website. So whichever flavor of probe zoom you might be interested in, there's a pre-order going on now. And the faster one, the T8, is a bit more expensive than the T12, but still, as far as these things go, they're pretty affordable. They start at like $3,500, and
that's not bad for what this lens does. Oh my God.
It is more expensive than their other probe lenses, but that being said, man, it's really impressive. And
that's a great price for a probe lens.
The fact that you can actually be zooming at the same time, so you're getting multiple focal lengths. In years past, the way it was is you switched out the entire lens. It was a prime, or there was these periscope systems that had an interchangeable front, and they were really, really expensive. So the fact that Laowa's got this super high quality and is introducing this new set of lenses, and
just to give you the flexibility of, like, you've got your setup done, you've got your probe, even if you're going to leave it at a fixed angle, you could still, punch in a little bit wherever you are, punch out a little bit,
exactly.
to focus on. I mean, like, if you're doing, like, imagine you're doing like nature documentary kind of stuff where you have to like go down into an animal's den or something. Like, you'll have this flexibility to get a much more precise framing.
It's pretty slick. So definitely worth checking out. Check it out over at Hot Red Cameras. Thank you so much, Laowa, for continuing to sponsor our fantastic show here. They're making it possible.
Damn it. I love that lens. I thought it was really cool. I wish I had an immediate use for it, but it was one of those things that I just like filed away. Like, one day, hopefully I'll have a good reason.
And now, short ends.
All right. So Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about our pet obsessions. What is your obsession this week?
It's a podcast. There's a podcast that's released from the New York Times called the Ezra Klein Show, and Ezra Klein is
I've seen it. Yeah, it's a good show.
He's an excellent reporter, and he's usually talking about politics. And last Friday, he did kind of a palate cleanser episode where it's just an interview with music producer Brian Eno.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so, for those of you who aren't familiar with Brian Eno, he's mostly a creature of the 70s and 80s. I think that like the things he's probably best known for were from that time. He produced stuff for like U2 and the Talking Heads, and he's a very noteworthy producer. But also, I think he coined the term for ambient music. And he creates a lot of ambient music. He has an album, I think it's called Music for Airports. And I'm not the world's biggest ambient music fan, so I can't really speak to his ambient music. But what I loved about this interview is he just kind of talked about art and art creation. I guess he has a new book out on the very subject. And maybe maybe I should read the book, and that should be my short end. But
but the podcast sounds great. Did they bring up Avalon and Roxy Music as well?
I don't believe they brought up Avalon or Roxy Music, but I mean. They were mostly talking about art, and he said something that like really kind of struck me about what is the value of art, because he brings up that making art is not a survival skill for human beings. It's not something that we have to do to find food or reproduce or anything. There's no essential need for it. But he talks a lot about like why it is in the human spirit to do it. And he said something that just really stuck with me. And he was saying that like play is how children learn and art is how adults play. And he was just honestly dropping pearls of wisdom like that left and right. I found it to be just like one of the most engrossing and interesting interviews in a long time. And part of that's because Ezra Klein is such a good interviewer. But I just encourage everyone to check it out. I think that, that's what we're here talking about ultimately, is about art and the creation of art and why we do it. And it's neat to hear someone kind of back, especially someone from a non-film background, to kind of back up and say like why he thinks the creative process exists for us at all on a basic level.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting, because cinema is just a amalgam of a whole lot of different arts all kind of shoved together. And people have called it the greatest art. It certainly seems to be the most expensive art. It is like
it kind of is when you think about it, especially like at its time. It's every kind of art, it's theater, it's radio, it's acting, it's painting, it's writing, it's all of that stuff.
It's music.
And, it definitely music is a big part of it. And even just musicality, even from the earliest silent films, like they didn't have a soundtrack, but you would go to a theater and there would be a live musician playing along with the movie.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because there are people who don't like movies. I meet them occasionally. There are I know you're giving me a wincing face. I know there are people out there who don't like.
Actually, a big weird admission here.
Yeah.
I have a cousin who lives in South Florida, and I saw him several months ago, and he almost with pride told me that he'd never seen any Star Wars movie ever, and that he'd never seen a movie that was made in black and white.
With pride. He said those things with pride.
And I'm like, you might not, I'm not saying everyone has to like Star Wars, but, you might check one out. He's like, I heard about it where the bad guy's his father, and, like, what else is there? And I'm like, everything else.
Look, there's a lot of people out there who
Sorry,
also say...
spoiler alert to anyone listening to us. Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's dad.
Oh, my God, you're ruining it.
I'm ruining it for everybody.
But I was going to say, look, you might not like opera. You might not like the theater. You might not like music, or you might not like one of these different things, but cinema tends to be pretty universal, where people actually like when all these things come together. So, and if you do like all of these different things, cinema kind of ends up being this wonderful, at least when it's done at the high level, when it's done really, really well, it ends up, being an empathetic, emotional experience that people have. I love going to a theater where there's not a dry eye in the house. That's the most amazing thing. So.
Anyway, Ilya, enough about my cousin. Check out the Ezra Klein Show.
I will. It's really good. I've heard it.
No, it's definitely a great interview. So, Ilya, what is your obsession this week?
Well, I got to do something self-serving. I got to go back to this American Cinematographer article here with, Kira Kelly's him on the cover. If you thumb through this magazine, and there might be an online version. In fact, there is an online version as well, too. If you thumb through the magazine, though, if you receive American Cinematographer in the mail, on page 52, there's a 4-page story all about all about me and my new product, which is the Betty luminous reflector. So they gave me 4 pages. It was like they gave me a lot of press, a lot of ink got spilled here. And they have a bunch of great photos of people who've been working with it. There's some fantastic quotes from like Adam Bricker, who shoots Hacks and Chef's Table, friend of the show, has been on the show a few times. He's been using it. It's really. I
have one right here. There's one. I'm pointing at it right here.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you're putting it to use. I'll have to come by and tune it for you. But I'm glad to see that you're.
Well, right now it's daytime, so my window would be overpowering anything that your Betty light could do. But
I was going to say it's probably, knowing your room in that big window, you need to adjust it. But hey, I'm super thrilled. American Cinematographer. Look, I've known the American Cinematographer. This is the second time we've mentioned them in the show, but I've known many of the people over there. I ran into them at Cinegear and I was like, hey, you should come take a look at this. I had Jay Holben come by and take a look at it. Jay Holben, I'm sure, put in a word or something. And next thing I know, it's like, boom, here is this article. And I got to thank Doug Bankston. Doug Bankston wrote the article. I've been reading Doug Bankston stuff for probably 10 years in American Cinematographer, at least. He wrote a really great piece years ago. I remember reading on Guardians of the Galaxy. And he left. He was like an editor at American Cinematographer. He left. And now he's back doing some freelance writing again. And so thank you, Doug. And thank you for the team for doing something really, really great here. Like giving me some editorial coverage, which is like, it's in a massive trade journal that is respected all around the world. This is really phenomenal. I'm humbled, and because of that, I also have to like self-promote. I've got a Betty hat on, and it's kind of hidden, but I've got a little shirt here. But yeah, nice. I'm going to be starting the full court press as soon as we start shipping, which should be in about 30 to 45 days. We're going to be shipping. Yeah, I know. So it's pretty exciting. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming out, and coming soon to a big screen near you. I don't think I can talk officially on a public place about all the people who've been using it, but we got some pretty major productions that have been using the Betty luminous reflector, and they'll be coming out next summer.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Yeah, I can't wait to have some of those people on the show and talk about it too. It'll be fun.
Cool. All
right, Ben, that does it for this episode. So where can people find you? They want to look you up.
If you want to find me, go to benrock.com. You can check that out. Find my socials. I'm also on places like LinkedIn and Facebook and Blue Sky. And I technically am still on Twitter, but I rarely post. Excuse me, X. Easy to find me. Check out my reel. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. Also over at bettylights.com. If you go to the contact page there, you can reach me that way. Betty Lights.
Nice. Very cool. So, Ilya, who do we have to thank this week?
We have to thank our intrepid editor/producer who's putting the show together, Alana Cody. Alana is doing all the things to make the show possible. It's amazing, incredible. We also have to thank Kays Alatracci. Kays did the music that you heard at the beginning of the show, and any other music that you may have heard in this episode. Kays has contributed tons to the production value of this episode.
And occasionally co-hosts.
And occasionally, when you or I are unavailable, he pops in and does extra duty. So thank you, Kays. Ben, that just about does it for the show. Do you want to take us out?
Would I ever? Thanks for tuning in.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.